Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's exclusive webinar on the latest update to Discovery Attender, version 3.7, Service Pack 1. My name is Kristen Priest. I'm with the marketing team here at Sherpa Software, and I'm happy to introduce to you Marta Farensbach today, our Discovery Attender product manager. And just a few housekeeping notes to be aware of. We welcome your questions and feedback throughout the webinar. Please submit any questions you may have to the questions module in your control panel, and Marta will answer those at the end of the presentation. Thank you again for joining us today, and Marta, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. All right, today, as Kristen mentioned, we are doing the overview of the new features for Service Pack 1 of Discovery Attender 3.7. If you're not just familiar with Discovery Attender 3.7, there is a What's New guide up on our website, and you'll also have details of 3.7, the base version, on the website as well. What we're going to do today is we're going to start with a review of the new features. I'm going to take you through a walkthrough of those features in Discovery Attender, and then I'll answer any questions. So let's get started and talk about the new features in Service Pack 1. So there are a number of features that we've added to the tool. There's nothing in architecturally that has changed with Discovery Attender, but there's some features that you definitely want to be aware of, including improvements to reporting, additional keyword criteria, some new hashes, messages, options for comparing searches, different views, and other miscellaneous features. And just so you know, this video will be available at sherpasoftware.com/YouTube once the presentation is complete. So the first option that you should be aware of are reporting improvements. Our CSV report has been improved in a number of ways. First of all, we've created 2 new reports, one for keyword reporting and a new custom report, which you're seeing here, which will allow you to choose columns that you are going to include in your report. We also have keyword criteria additions. This includes multiple proximity, negative proximity, and excluding. All these options will help you make your criteria more effective when doing your searches. We're going to go through these in a little more detail when we go through the product walkthrough. A new unique message hash has been added and is actually now the default for deduplication. This unique message hash is a combination of the subject, sender, send date, to CC, BCC, and attachment count. Those properties are, a new hash is created of those properties, and it's a very effective use of the hashing mechanism. Previous to this hashing mechanism, we had the plain text, the body field hashes, the MD5 body field hashes, which have a lot of users said were a little bit too strict for what they were trying to do. This new hash, we're confident, will address those limitations of the body hash fields while maintaining not just flexibility, but also accuracy and deduplication. We also have new options for comparing searches that allows you to compare one search to the other. The options are allowing you to select custom criteria to use with your messages, your attachments, and your files. So instead of having the default criteria already selected for you, this criteria is going to let you choose what you consider a match between 2 different searches. In addition to that, we've added a new view for domains. This domain view is going to prove helpful when you're trying to analyze your data of where items were sent, where it was going to, different information. You'll be able to view all the addresses that are associated with certain domains and all the email that's associated with these domains as well. In addition to that, we've improved exception handling in 2 different ways. Number 1, you have an option to better identify non-text documents by removing document properties from the text of a message. The second one, which you see here, is the PDF password handling. If you have a PDF file that has a blank password, in other words, it's encrypted without a password, or if you have a PDF that has a password, we attempt to parse those passwords based on your settings. And what you can do is you can enter your list of passwords by enable this feature. And especially with older versions, we have seen some success in reducing the number of exceptions. There's also a number of miscellaneous improvements to the pre-search tool, including full Exchange 2010 support, including the dumpsters, the online archives, and CAS server authentication. The pre-search tool also now supports the automated export of multiple mailboxes, additional NSF export functionality, and other options. There's also a few smaller options in the main console, also in the context menu, and other areas that we're going to go through. But right now, let's go through and do a walkthrough of our product. Now, before we do so, I do want to make a few notes here. First of all, this version of Discovery Tender now requires, as a base feature, Microsoft Framework.NET 3.5 version with Service Pack 1. The links to download this, if you do not already have it in your environment, you can download them from the Microsoft website, and those links will be on the download page for this new version of Discovery Tender. The other thing you want to be aware of is that Exchange 5.5 and 2000 are deprecated. Now, what that means, we haven't actually taken the functionality outside of the tool. The Discovery Tender will still work as well as it did with the other ones, but we no longer test against, nor do we support the searching of Exchange 5.5 or 2000 servers. If you have any questions about this deprecation, please don't hesitate to contact technical support. But with that note, let's take a look at the product and how it works. What you're looking at now is Discovery Tender version 3.7 Service Pack 1. And as you can see, it doesn't look much different from the previous version of Discovery Tender. To verify you have Service Pack 1 installed, click on About Discovery Tender, and you'll see the product version is now Discovery 3.71. 3.70 Service Pack 1 is 3.71. Okay, let's take a look really quickly at the different features that we have gone over. The first thing you want to take a look at is your settings screen. In the settings, you'll notice the first thing is that we've reorganized how the settings have been set up. Among other things, the View options is now called Organization, and Viewer options now relates to the default text viewer that you will be using. Okay? By default, if you have the Sherpa text viewer installed, that is listed as the default. Okay? Another thing that we have done here is change the search options to add two important features. Number one, you can change where your temp directories are storing items. If in the past you've had problems with Discovery Tender filling up your temporary directories, we can assure you that you can now put them wherever you like. Now, we do recommend you put and you keep your temporary directories at the default unless you're having issues. And if you are having issues, make sure your temporary directories are on the same machine where Discovery Tender is installed. Another option here that has been added is the including document properties as parsed text. This is on by default, and this is what is going to help you identify non-text items. If you disable this option, the document properties will not be included as text, and therefore you'd be able to identify more easily non-text items. Okay. You also have an option here to parse hidden HTML content. This particular option will give you, for example, if you have certain properties in Word documents that are in HTML, this will be an effective way of finding those options. I mentioned before in the presentation that we have PDF options. And again, what we're doing here is we're attempting to parse passwords out of PDF. Oftentimes in an exception list, you're going to see an error, something along the lines of file is encrypted or password protected. With PDF files, we are able to attempt to run your list of selected passwords against those PDF files. And once again, this works most effectively in older versions of PDF files. If we cannot parse the password for one reason or another, you'll still get the exception, but we find you get about a 20 to 30% improvement using this feature on items that are PDF password protected. And if you do choose to use this option, when you export your PDF, you have the option to export it in the original and also with the password removed. If you choose to do it with the password removed, you can append text to that password, that file, if, for example, no password. Okay. Some other options that you might want to be aware of here is under Exchange. You can use, by default, the CAS servers. If you are using Exchange 2010 or 2007, this is probably very important to you. You can click on Add to add in your CAS server, and you can test the server before you even enter it in your list. Okay? And using these CAS servers will allow you to automatically use this client access server versus your standard Exchange server. If you don't have Exchange, if your organization does not use CAS servers, you can leave this list empty. Okay? Now, your NSF options have all been included in the same option here. If you are searching NSF files, we do recommend you put your default password in for your Notes client if you have one. And you have this new option that you can include non-mail items in your search. Now what this means is quite simple. Discovery Tender can only search and retrieve mail items from NSF files. However, sometimes you have non-mail templated NSF files that contains email. And what this option lets you do is search those items for email. So I would recommend including that by default if you're searching NSF items. Okay. One other option here is container files. The defaults are usually pretty good, but what this option allows you to do is it allows you the flexibility of how you want to, what you want to consider container files, number one, and number two, how you want to analyze this container file. If for whatever reason you wish to exclude container files from your search, for example, you probably want to use the single file option and exclude them based on file type. Not here necessarily, but in your search. The defaults are effective for most people, and I wouldn't change those unless you have a very specific reason for doing so. Okay? Let's take a look at some of the options that we have now in the search wizard. Before we go, I just want to point out that we do have this new rename search functionality that allows you to take any search, for example, this new search, and rename it to something more effective. Okay? So if you've spelled something wrong, if you need to rename it, put more detail on it, etc., you can do so. Now, as part of the search wizard looks very much like it did previously. However, there's some options that you want to be aware of that we've included in the tool. And most of those will be on the Choose Keywords screen. Under search expressions, or even in a word list, we've added improvements to proximity searching. Now, your traditional syntax for proximity searching is this: blue, near, 5 words of green. And you can expand this to be blue near 5 words of green, or red, etc. What we've added to Discovery Tender is the ability to add multiple nears. So you could say, I want blue near red or green, or near purple. Okay? And you'll notice that this is now syntactically correct, and your logic. Okay? So basically, the multiple nears allows you to put many nears right next to one another. In addition to this, and I'm doing a search expression, so I'm putting an or there. In addition to this, we now have the opportunity to use exclusionary criteria, not near. So what you can do is you can say, I want to find income tax when it's not near 5 words of personal, for example. Okay? So I hope you can see how effective this will be when you're trying to find a certain phrase as long as it's not in proximity to another one. Another example of this exclusionary proximity criteria, and I'm going to put an or on here because I have a search expression, is to utilize the exclude. So what you can do, for example, is do confidential, asterisk, you want to find any instance of confidential, except you want to exclude instances where it's within 4 words of confidentiality statement. Now, a good way to think about this, an example here, is if you had every email that was coming out of your system have the word confidentiality statement in it. Obviously, if you're searching for the word confidential or confidentially, you're going to hit every email that you have. But what this does will find every instance of confidential except when it's in confidentiality statement. Now, if you do use this exclude functionality, there's several things you want to be aware of. Number one, the first word, the one that you're trying to find, must be in your exclusionary statement. And the second thing to be aware of is this works on either side. So let's just say you're looking for Smith. Someone's last name is Smith, but you're not looking for John Smith. Okay? This works. What's going to happen here is you're going to exclude every instance of John Smith, but just remember, Smith has to be part of this expression. Okay? So that's some of the things that you can do with the new proximity searching. Let's take a look at some of the features we have on the results side. Oops, excuse me. The results side, let's open this up and take a look. The first set of features are found in the results summary. Under Actions, Compare Searches, we find that we now have multiple items to compare against. For those of you not familiar with the Compare Searches functionality, Compare Searches allows us to compare one search that we've already run against the current search that we have open. In previous versions, the Compare Searches worked only against the same source. In other words, you'd only be marking items that matched the source that you, the same source that you searched, the exact same PST, for example, or the exact same file share. Now, we allow you not just to do the same source, but any source using a default criteria, or allowing you to put together your own custom criteria. So you can compare searches using your own selected criteria. Now, if you use the default is what we use for standard searches. And it's very strict. You probably, if you had multiple items in multiple data stores, you'd probably be better off using the unique message hash or maybe some of the other options. And let's talk for a second about this unique message hash. The unique message hash, as I mentioned before, is a hash using an MD5 hash of several key properties of a message. In this case, the subject, the sender, the sent date, the to, the CC, the BCC, and the attachment count. That is pretty effective to identify items that are the same. Okay? Just remember the sent date is at the second level, and having all the recipients, both 2CC and BCC, will give you both instances of that, regardless if a BCC recipient received it or a CC recipient received it. So using that unique message hash is very effective. And it's not just used effective in compare searches. We also have changed the default criteria for deduplication as well. So going forward, we would just come in and select the different options. Okay, once again, you would come in, you can select your unique message hash and then maybe your attachment hash to identify attachments that might be in one search or another. And file names, you can use the file path, the file name, etc. Okay, then you just come in and select the search that you want to compare against. Okay, so maybe I'll compare against my standard files. Okay, we identify what we want to mark it as, and then begin processing the values. Now, if we have no hits, that's acceptable as well, but usually when we do have hits, it's going to mark those items, in this case one item, with the mark that we had. And then we can look in here and find the item that matched in the other search. Okay? And just so you know, if you're not familiar with the marks and the other things, you can use the filter to remove marks or to only filter items that don't have marks. Okay? So that's how that works. Another option in the results summary is the deduplication. And again, it didn't change much, but our default criteria did change. When you now add the recommended criteria, you'll notice that we have the unique message hash. And as I mentioned before, the unique message hash does automatically include subject, sender, and send date, so you really don't need to have those additionally. However, they're there to give clarity on what you're trying to do. Attachment criteria is basically the same. That hasn't changed except, again, for the unique message hash. Now keep in mind, you still have the option to use the older methodology, to use the plain text, the HTML, and the RTF bodies. But they are very, very strict criteria. So the unique message hash, you might want to play around with it until you're comfortable with it to make sure that your duplicates that you're finding are what you're expecting to find. Last but not least is file criteria. We've changed the default criteria to include the modification date instead of the creation date. When files are copied using Windows Explorer, so one of your users or your custodians has copied a file using Windows Explorer, chances are the creation date will change. And therefore, when you're trying to deduplicate the same file using creation date, well, let's just say that wasn't a good idea. So we're using modify date instead with the file name, the hash, for the unique value. In fact, you could just use file hash and file name to get that same information. Again, these are made flexible so that you can decide what you consider the best criteria to use. Just run it through, and it works exactly as it does normally. Now let's take a look once this goes through. We're going to take a look at our different views, the different reports that we've added. So again, when we come to results summary, the third thing I want to point out to you here are the new reporting features we've added. Your list view report is the exact same one that's always been in the report. Okay? The only difference is we've added a new field on the end here, which is a listing of all your keywords. And each keyword is separated by a pipe. Okay? So this is what matched for each of these keywords for each of these items. Okay? Another report that we've created is actually a keyword report. And this keyword report is very similar to the one you just saw, except what it does is it creates a column for each of the keywords that matched. Okay? And you can see when you export this to CSV, it might prove helpful for different grouping options. The last report that we've included is a custom list report that allows you to select which fields you want. We recognize that there's an awful lot of data in the CSV, the default CSV report, so this will allow you to just select the fields that are of interest to you. Okay? So those are the reporting improvements that we've included. Now, another improvement to the tool is the addition of the domain view. Now, this domain view is created using the domain that is parsed from the address field. So as you know, the default version of Discovery Attender in earlier versions creates lists of addresses that were found in the items, and it has different groupings. Each of these addresses now have different domains associated with them, and those domains are then grouped together. And you can come in and see everybody that matches a certain domain, the addresses and the individual messages. And you can do several things with these. You can mark them, you can filter them, any other grouping mechanism that you please. Okay? Now, in addition to these changes, we have a bunch of miscellaneous changes in the tool that I want to show you. And they include improvements to the pre-search tool. So let's take a quick look at our pre-search tool and the improvements that we've done there. Under Tools, Pre-search, you'll now see some options that are helpful. The first thing is, even without going into the tool, you now have different options for your Exchange mailboxes, including 2010 CAS server support. Okay? Behind the scenes, Exchange 2010 is fully supported, including dumpsters, online archives, etc. Okay? So when you're now searching, when you're exporting from mailboxes, not only can you export from your 2010 servers, you can also add multiple mailboxes to your list of items. So you could come in here and actually choose a number of mailboxes. And that will add them into your list. And then you're able to exclude those, or export those one by one. Some other options that you now have in the pre-search tool includes searching for PSTs to deduplicate, it also includes adding different export folder structure. You can export it now to a single folder, as well as recreating the existing folders as well as the size and files per source options that you currently have. Some more options that you might find helpful are an NSF to PST, or NSF to EML has been added to the NSF to PST option here. So hopefully you'll find those tools very useful in the pre-search tool. Now, in addition to all the changes that we've made that I've showed you today, we've also updated, made a number of hotfix changes. Anything that was included in a hotfix is included in Service Pack 1, and a full listing of the release notes can be found up on the website of all the items that were changed, including some issues with, we now have improved MDB file searching. We've done some improvements for the SharePoint component searching. We also now have some choices for opening items from the results menu. So I mentioned before that the default setting for your viewer option is here. Double-clicking on the item will open it in this case, the Sherpa viewer. But you can also take an item. Let's just take a quick look here. You can also take an item and open it, View, Actions, Open in Native Viewer. Okay. Now you do have to have the option open on your machine for that particular for in this case, this is a Word document. I need to have Microsoft Word on my machine for the native viewer to work. But again, I can open it Sherpa Viewer or native viewer regardless of what the default is. But when I double click on it, I do open this in the Sherpa Viewer, and I'm going to see highlighted all my keyword hits. Okay, so that might prove helpful to you as well. Okay, so that is an overview, and that basically is our overview of the Discovery Attender's new features for Service Pack 1. Now, if you do have any questions, please do submit them now. And in addition to that, what you can do if you'd like to see the product in full. In other words, you'd like to see the product if you haven't seen 3.7, for example, or if you have details or questions about the entire product, you can always sign up for a training session. So let's take a look at some of our questions. First of all, can we exclude multiple terms? Yes, you can. But the way you're going to exclude multiple terms is you're going to do it, let's see here, how would you do this? So if you come to choose keywords, so you can say, I want confidential, exclude, confidential. Statement, and just excuse my spelling, assume I spelled everything right, or, okay, that's how the exclude would work. Okay, so it would exclude either one of those from the item. Okay? All right, let's see if we have other questions here. Question about NSF files. Can you quickly walk through a sample of NSF files? I'm not going to do that right now, simply because we're looking at Service Pack 1 features. But do call into support or call me directly, and I will be happy to walk that through you. When is this product to be released? Well, it was supposed to be released this morning. I think there's just some paperwork that's being done, but once that's done, it should be released this afternoon. When it is released, you're going to get, as long as you have maintenance, you're going to be getting an email that'll let you know that the version is available, and the download instructions are also included on that email. So you should see that shortly, certainly before the end of the day. Another question that we have is can we pause and restart a search? Unfortunately, no, we do not have that capability, but what we can do, and this was something that was available even in 3.7, is you can research selected items. So let's just say you have 2 or 3 mailboxes that are taking their good old time completing. You want to get your results for the portion that's completed. You could cancel those individual tasks and research these selected items. Okay, so another question here was the database back end, how we moved over to SQL. We are planning to move over to a different back end for the database, but this is not something that we're going to do in our service pack. The next major version of Discovery Tender will be version 4.0, and that version will have a completely rewritten back end, including a new database. Now, I should point out our release schedule is as follows. We will have one more service pack, that's Service Pack 2, which is currently scheduled to be released in Q2 of next year. Then at the end of next year, we will have that completely rewritten version of Discovery Tender with the new version. Another question was, do embedded messages get unique attachment MD5 hashes? And the answer to that question is yes. It is the actual, what happens if you have an embedded message that is a hit? That embedded message is then an attachment hit. And the attachment itself does get the MD5 hash as if it were a file. I believe the bit stream of that embedded message is actually what gets encrypted. But if you do have specific questions about that, you might want to contact me offline again, because that is a very technical topic. Okay, so is there a standalone viewer for use in, that's a good question. The question is there a standalone viewer for use of a public information officer for filtering also? Actually, no. In order to use the Discovery Tender result sets, you do in fact have to use Discovery Tender. However, one of the key components of Discovery Tender is exporting items. So when you're exporting your item into TST or in another viewer, for example, native format, they can open them up in that format. However, of course, you do lose the context of the keyword. If you'd like to contact me offline with the person who asked that question, I can talk to you about different options on for example, installing Discovery Tender and having them look at different projects, that's always an option as well. Okay. Alrighty, there's another question. Is there any charge or fee for the upgrade? The answer to that is no, there never is. As long as you have maintenance, Discovery Tender is, any upgrades in Discovery Tender are included with maintenance. And as another note to that, if you ever have suggestions for Discovery Tender, features that you'd like to see inside the tool, we're always happy to consider them, and I would say the great majority of our features are from customers in the first place. Once again, a full recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/SherpaSoftware. Okay, are there modifications to the existing project databases with the upgrade? The answer to that question is yes, but it's seamless to the user. We've added some fields, and I believe we've added a table. But once the first time you open a project, it will open those databases and upgrade them. And by upgrading, let me explain that we don't change any existing data. You can open and search and view existing data exactly as you would with the current data. The only difference is you're not going to be able to see, for example, the domains, because the parsing of domains is done as part of the search. So any items that are being searched, that are coming from previous older version databases, you're going to be able to open them, you're going to be able to see them. None of the data is changing, but by the same token, you're not going to see some of the new features like the domain views for those items. Okay, so renamed file extensions. That's a good question, and I do believe, and I don't have the answer off the top of my head for that, I believe that's something that will be thrown as an exception, but I can certainly test that out. What I would do with that particular question is contact support, and they could probably help you, walk you through that one. So a question someone has is there an easy way, without going into the back end, to view messages or attachments that contain only select addresses, no addresses outside your search criteria? There's actually a feature that we're working on for Service Pack 2. Currently, the best way to do that, actually, there is no very good way to do that, to be honest, in the current version without going into the back end or without going into alternate addresses. But I can show you, if you did have that particular query, again, that functionality will definitely be in Service Pack 2. You're not the only person to have asked for it. But unfortunately, right now, you do have to either go through the domain views or go through the advanced filter or the database to get that information. Okay. Any other questions that people might have? I think I went through them all, the questions that we have here. If you do have further questions, if you have any comments, anything you'd like to see in the tool, please don't hesitate to contact us directly through technical support, or you are welcome to drop me an email as well. Let me just see. How does the update affect deduping across previous searches prior to the upgrade? It doesn't affect it at all. Your deduplication is done, it's always done as a database exercise. Okay, so you always are able to see the results of the previous deduplication. And more to the point, you can always mimic exactly how the older deduplication worked. In your action history, if you look at your action history, you actually have deduplication as one of the listings here, and it'll tell you what your format was that you used. So if you wanted to replicate the exact same dedupe that you did before, you can still do that. Okay? We don't change anything when we deduplicate. It's just a database exercise. So if you wanted the exact same results for your deduplication, just use the older versions and the older criteria. It's all still there. Although we changed the default, it's the default for any new deduplication going forward. And those defaults don't have to be used. You can adjust them to whichever deduplication criteria you'd like. Okay. Alrighty. I don't see any new questions. But again, if you do have questions that I didn't get to or you didn't answer, or if you'd like a full training session, or if you'd like support in any way, shape, or form, don't hesitate to contact technical support. You guys all have maintenance, and that's what it's there for. You should be seeing an email later today with the download links for this new version. And once again, if you have any suggestions, we always welcome them for future features. Okay? On that note, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to thank you once again for your patience and your attention. And we hopefully will contact each other sometime soon. Take care. Bye.